What's up, everybody, and welcome into the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus. Joining me always is Amanda, and we are so happy to be here today. A very cool episode planned for you. First, let's remind you, podcast.liquidtrucking.com is the website. I want to get that out of the way because we got a lot to talk about here today, Amanda. Head on over to the website, check out photo galleries, check out all of the episodes over there, what the episodes are about, info on who's on them. You can even pick yourself up a sweet Liquid Trucking shirt over there at podcast.liquidtrucking.com, and you can pit yourself up against some of the other drivers to see how you're stacking up as we're seeing who's running the most miles with a little leaderboard up there as well. Once again, podcast.liquidtrucking.com. Welcome into the show today, Amanda. This is a really cool conversation that we got to take our hats off to our guy Jason Eisenman for setting us up with. We are welcoming Brian Fielkow a little bit later to the show, and this guy might be the most experienced person in the trucking industry at large that we've ever talked to here, Amanda.
It's slightly intimidating, but I'm not going to lie. When you told me we were talking about culture, company culture, office culture, I perked up. I have to make a confession to you right here and now, okay? When my terrestrial radio career ended, I was brought into an office, I had to sign a paper, all that stuff, and I said, boss man, like we were close, we're cool people. I said, boss man, what is the reason that we're using? Because, radio is radio. And he said one word, culture. And it blew my mind. And it wasn't that I wasn't a good person. It was just the way that they do things there is the way they've done things there forever. And I came from a different type of scenario and a different type of background. But that word just became a regular part of my vocabulary after that. And something that I never even considered before ended up being something extremely relevant to pretty much every facet of my life. So culture is going to be an interesting thing to talk about.
I don't want to speak poorly about somebody that I haven't met before, and I know that you say that you and your boss that fired you there were close, and look, if that's the case, I totally get it. I've worked with you for long enough now to know that you are nothing but an asset to the culture at our company and what we do, and so it makes me wonder, were they actively trying to degrade the culture at this radio station that they let you go from?
I will say that the reason I am so much happier in life right now is because I work for a company with a company culture that is much more in line with my morals, values, and work ethic. So we will leave it at that. And okay. I will happily bash them to their faces anytime. So,
well said and very professional. We had a culture problem at our old radio station too, where I did a show called The Donkey Show, and the culture problem was what I would call management. Well, the general manager hates us, and we kind of drive the culture bus at the radio station, and everybody else loved it. But you kind of, first of all, and I don't care to say this about him now because, this has been almost 20 years ago at this point, so I don't have any scruples left. He doesn't work at that company anymore. He was a drunk. I mean, we caught him so many times from the studio. We had a third floor window, and we would watch him pull a bottle out of his console, take a few shots, and then drive to lunch, and then drive back and take a couple of shots before he came into the studio. And this guy lived an hour drive away from the studio. So, we've all, the three of us that were involved in that show, still to this day, wonder if our biggest mistake was just letting it go and never reporting it, because we're a bunch of kids in our 20s back then. We didn't want to be the party poopers or whatever, but the dude put hundreds of thousands of people in danger every single day getting behind the wheel. And really, you've seen this before in radio where a show will get so popular that it's like, the hosts of the show, yeah, we understand we have managers now, but we're going to have to way overstep for you to fire us because we're making you too much money.
Right.
And that was sort of where we were. In our little tiny market, Amanda, there was a series of 6 months where we billed over $1 million every month, and there's only 180,000 people in this city that I live in. And so it was like, you can't really do anything about us because you have a boss too. And if that money stops coming in, your boss is going to have questions for you. Obviously, if you can't maintain that type of earning, and it's hard to do in such a small market. Then all of a sudden you get less and less untouchable.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you right now, the culture of that place fell the hell apart when we left it. And I know that because I'm still so close to so many people, and I've been offered 3 jobs back at that station since that happened. My reaction, Amanda, that I learned about how to go forward with culture from this whole experience was we had a little bit of a tiff over our Facebook page. We had 25,000 followers on our Facebook page. And when we signed our non-disclosure agreement that made it possible for us to get the very small severance that they offered us, we asked them, hey, we're going to want to keep that Facebook page. You guys don't need it. You're rebranding the station. You're flipping the format. Can we have that? And they said, that's fine. I don't see a problem with that. And from the time it took us to drive to the station to my buddy Drew's house about 7 minutes away, they had locked all of us out of the Facebook page and taken it away from us. And so my final words to the guy that I just called a drunk on this show were kiss my ass. And I have it recorded on a phone call where we're on speakerphone and I'm dressing him down for being basically two-faced in this whole thing. And he's like, well, myself and the owner just didn't think that that was the right idea. And I was like, well, yourself and the owner can kiss my ass. And we hung up the phone. And then we all looked at each other and we're like, we should go cash these severance checks. Like, they're probably not
hurry
going to
up
leave
and
that
do
on.
that.
And
Man.
so what I learned, though, was that nobody is bigger than the culture. And it was really hard for me to learn because, yeah, you've got people calling you for years after, telling you that, oh, it's so much different here. We miss you guys in the hallways. We miss all the hijinks. And, you know, I used to hate it when you guys would steal something off my desk and then make a bit out of it. But now I come in and everything's on my desk and I miss that. Yeah, that's great, but at the same time, there were other issues, and the culture couldn't save us. The culture that we brought couldn't save us, nor could we save the culture after we were gone. It's sort of bigger than everybody. It's what do they say? The sum of the parts is greater than the whole a lot of the times. But in this case, I really do think it was opposite. The whole was greater than the sum of the parts. It wasn't just us working on that culture. It was just that we brought the unpredictability of it, of what was going to happen today when you go into work to do your normal office job. What 3 idiots are going to march down the hall and do something to you or around you that's going to totally throw the whole day into chaos? And it's a lot of fun, and it established a great culture, but it's really hard to continue that, and it's really hard to make decisions every single day that advance and enrich the culture. And that is really what we're here to talk about today with a guy who grew a company that you might know called Jetco Delivery out of Houston tenfold after he bought it. And he did it by changing culture first. He believes that culture drives the ownership of the decisions that drivers will eventually make when it comes to things like safety and customer service and all of these things. And I really can't wait to get him in here, Amanda, because the one thing I will tell you makes this such a perfect podcast is we get to experience the culture at Liquid Trucking every single time that we turn on these mics. And I mean, I don't want to speak for you here, but when I see it, I go, is there a better culture in trucking? I don't know. If there is, I haven't met him yet. But, you know, I'd like to hear your thoughts since this is kind of, you know, your first foray into trucking and you're getting to meet a lot of different fleets now and deal with a lot of different fleets. I mean, I'm so stoked for this episode. Your thoughts on getting Brian on for this podcast?
I think this industry in general has, I'll say, a culture of pride. You know, I don't think it matters whether you're hauling one type of bed or another. It does not matter what your load is. There is a certain sense of pride in the culture of being a driver. And I love to see that. And then you take it a step further, you take it a little bit deeper. In my experience with the folks at Liquid over the last, we're at 6 months here, buddy. It'll be
crazy.
six months here in a few days. That's insane.
That's
but
crazy.
How many times have we said, like, oh, we're going to go work for Liquid? You know, and we're half joking, but we're also not, because the culture there does seem so incredible. It seems like people are holding themselves to the highest standard as opposed to someone wagging their finger at them, telling them to be at that high standard. So
Yep.
definitely had quite a taste of what the culture is. And honestly, if I was anybody in management over at Liquid, I'd be pretty darn proud of the way that these drivers represent on their behalf.
100%. And I will say right now, go ahead and mark it down. If this podcast ever unceremoniously goes away the way that my radio station or radio job did, I will be applying for a job at Liquid Trucking, and I will have one until I kneecap myself with a blown cap because I am not detail-oriented enough to do the job that these guys do every single day. But no, I all joking aside, and it's hard to say that when I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but seriously, like it's an envious, envy might be a bad word because it's negatively connotated, but when you've worked in bad culture and then you get to work with other people that are working in a good culture, it makes you envious. And I'm fortunate enough, just like you are, to not have a bad culture at the company we work for, Bulldog. It's a fantastic culture.
Oh my goodness.
Monday but it's
meetings.
A heavy lift. Yeah, it's
just
a heavy
chatting with
lift.
our coworkers. It's lovely, but it's like-minded people, and I love that. I love that. Like-minded when it's in a positive way.
Exactly. And, I mean, listen, I'm a rambler. It's amazing to me in the almost 4 years that I've worked for this company that nobody has come into a meeting and before the, client gets there said, Marcus, shut the up for the next hour. Because I loved, I'm a conversationalist at heart. And when conversation gets flowing, that's when your boy hits his stride. And so, but that is like, I've never been told that because the culture here is so good. They'll tell me that afterwards if they really want to tell me that. We all get along well, and that's kind of the same thing. I mean, just a couple episodes ago when Thomas offered his number to Rondell on the phone, it's like, that's culture right there. That is what we're talking about. That's drivers helping out drivers. That's everybody moving as one rather than everybody doing their own thing. And I don't think we can say enough nice things about the culture that Liquid has instilled from the top level of management all the way down through the lower level employees. And we get to have a really cool conversation about it right now with Brian Fielkow. Let's get him in here.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
All right, welcome back in here to the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Amanda, we are very fortunate on this show all the time to get really good guests, great guests even. So many people from Liquid Trucking and outside Liquid Trucking have joined us, and today we might have nailed down our biggest interview ever here for the show, and I'm very excited to welcome him. So, Amanda, please join me in welcoming the former owner and CEO of Jetco Delivery in Houston, former executive vice president and former board member of the GTI Group. He's the author of the new book that came out recently, Making Safety Happen, and a keynote speaker, and if I do say so myself, one of the industry's foremost experts on organizational culture. Let's welcome Brian Fielkow to the show. Brian, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me. I really look forward to the time we're going to spend together.
Me too, especially seeing all of your experience across the industry and beyond, Brian. Let's go ahead and just start out with a little bit of background here. How did you come to purchase Jetco? Were you always in the trucking industry? Where did this whole journey start for you?
No, it's like if I looked at my career going backwards as a playbook, it's one I never could have written. So I began my career practicing corporate law in Milwaukee. And while I enjoyed that very much, I looked at the entrepreneurial side and all the clients we served, and I'm like, I want to do that. And wound up having an opportunity to go work as the chief operating officer of a very large regional recycling company, family-held company in Milwaukee. And we grew that business. It was a nice business when I got there, and we grew it more, sold it to Waste Management. And those years in recycling and then working at Waste Management was really where I really got my firsthand look at culture, at taking a service or product that many view as commoditized and decommoditizing it, at culture. And in my years at Waste Management, I learned more from some of the best people I've worked with, but I still never had the chance to go do my own thing. And then that's when I bought Jetco Delivery in 2006 in a Houston-based logistics company.
And you grew that company hand over fist in the amount of time that you were working there. Did some great things for Jetco, of course. If you have been on the highways and byways throughout the United States, you're going to have seen a Jetco truck at some point in time, or at least the Jetco logo. Was that all kind of culture-based, the work that you did there? Is that how you turned it around, or is that how you grew the company so much, Brian? What were some of the main goals that you accomplished over your time with Jetco?
You know, when I bought Jetco in 2006, I would say that the company, it was well run. It was started by about four brothers that started the business in 1976. So they had run it, for 30 years, and it was not broken, but it may have been a little bit tired, right? The brothers either needed to sell or double down on their capital, and so selling made sense for them. And I made a commitment to myself back when we bought the business that we were going to run a very clear, simple playbook that was focused on a couple things. First of all, hiring and developing the best people, which included building on the company's success. In other words, a lot of buyers come in like, okay, I own this thing now, I'm the smartest guy in the room, and they break it. So we wanted to take what the company was doing well and build on it. We invested heavily in fleet, right? We thought that a newer fleet would help us not just with fuel economy, but also with attracting, the best drivers we could, and less downtime, therefore better customer service. So people, fleet, and then ultimately technology. And that really was the simple playbook we ran. And then over time, we decided to leverage the asset-based business with a brokerage business so that we were able to take the asset business and grow it exponentially much faster than we could have just on a capital-intensive trucking business alone. But when I look back, and there were days that seemed so complicated, and there were times that were so frustrating, right? Like, am I treading water here? But when I look back, it really was that simple playbook that got us there. And the customer centricity, right? And having customers come back time and again, repeat customers as opposed to spot business. We didn't want to make a living in the spot market. We realized quickly that customers paid a premium or came back to you not for what you did, providing a truck, but for how you did it, the professionalism of your drivers, the reliability, the honesty. Not every day, as you all know, was a great day, but when something went wrong, we were honest about it, and we recovered. We earned trust. And so those cultural aspects, the things that keep you strong on the inside, are also, I believe, what your customers are paying a premium for.
That's so well said, Amanda. We talk to the drivers on this podcast so much, and one thing that some of the most senior drivers at Liquid always talk about is the customer service. And even if it's during a bad day, they'll tell you got to put that smile on. You got to hit them. You got to kill them with kindness, regardless of what you might be dealing with. It's something we really hear a lot about, Amanda, doing these episodes that we do each week.
I completely agree with you. Even the last group of guys we had a conversation with, not just customer service outwardly, but inwardly as well, making sure each other are taken care of so you can continue to provide that same level of service. I have to say, though, Brian, it's crazy to think about on such a large level coming into something that's been run maybe by a family, and they have their way that they're set in. On a smaller scale, we have a local Italian restaurant in town, and the longtime owner passed away this fall. So younger members of the family came in, and lo and behold, a few months later, for the first time ever in history, this restaurant is taking credit cards. So that technology change, the freshening up, changing the guards sometimes is enough to do that. But I have a question. How long, once you start getting involved, do you think is a good idea to wait before you start really making changes? Like, how long do you think you need to spend with a company before you feel like you have a good grasp on what their culture is, before you can kind of tell them, hey, you should try this or try that?
If I sense something is an emergency, like we're hemorrhaging somewhere, or we have a risk that we just shouldn't be taking, I'll just get in there and triage it as fast as I can. But under normal circumstances, and this is just how I'm wired. It might take me a little while, and then once we execute, we go. But in that little while, I'm learning, I'm absorbing, I'm getting to build relationships with people. I want to be sure, the old saying is measure twice, cut once.
Right.
And so I want to make sure that, I really understand what I'm doing. And so, and then what I'll do is I'll try to meter out the changes. And if it's a broad change I want to make, I may make it with a test group first. A good example of that was, we were sort of, at least for a company our size, we were early in putting in two-way cameras in the trucks. Larger fleets were doing it, but fleets our size, so drivers had a lot of choices. They could have stayed with us, or they could have said, "Oh, I'm going to go somewhere with no cameras." I think that's less and less true these days, but back then it was true. So if I would have just said, "Okay, Monday morning, you're all getting in your trucks, and here are the cameras," it would have been a disaster. So we put together a beta group, a test group, and we made sure that test group consisted of people that might have been inclined to support it and might have been inclined to oppose it, and get a broad spectrum of opinions, deal with some of the fears, some of which were legitimate about putting the cameras in. By the time that we put the cameras in on a global basis, right, for the whole fleet, the rollout was led by this beta group. I got to sort of sit on the sidelines and watch, because by that point we got the bugs out, we overcame the objections, and our drivers actually saw that, hey, these things help me as much as they help the company. But, had we not done the beta group, had we not been incremental and careful on rolling out the change, it could have been a much different result. So I guess, man, my point is that I'm a fan of absorbing, building relationships, hearing multiple points of view, but then at some point, whatever that point is, 3 months, 6 months, when it's go time, then we go.
That's so cool. It's the same thing that Liquid will do. We have a guy on this podcast all the time named Polar Bear. He's been with Liquid for almost 30 years, and he's one of the beta group for most of the technology that they test. And some of it he loves and some of it he doesn't, but I'll tell you this. I feel like that's a really smart way to go about it. And I love the way that you're not only getting guys that you think would be inclined to like this new tech, you're also getting guys that would be inclined to give you maybe some even harsh feedback about it, Brian, because you do need to hear all sides to help you make the correct decision, right? The feedback that the guys that didn't like it may have even been more important than the feedback from the guys that liked it. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, and like we had one guy that, he hated it. Everybody's going to quit, right? And then all of a sudden, he was involved in an incident, a crash, where, without the technology, he would have certainly been written up and it would have been on his record. But because of the technology, he was not ticketed. He saw right away that, hey, this, if people pull PSP scores pre-hire, right, we can see a driver's safety profile. This protected this driver's safety profile. He all of a sudden saw that we weren't kidding when we said this is to protect you and the organization. We're on the same side. We're on the same sideline here. We're not across the field from each other. So you have to get people like that. They can help you sway the opinions of others. But when you think about technology and rolling out technology, it's nothing more than a subset of change management. If you can manage change well, you can integrate technology. If you struggle to manage change, then technology is just going to be another place where you trip and fall. So it's change management. And what's at the core of change management? It's communication. It's trust. If you have those things in place, you go through it together, you figure it out, you figure out where are the stumbling blocks, and then you either implement, or if Polar Bear comes back and says, hey Amanda, hey Marcus, here's why, then you either delay it or you don't do it.
Exactly. That part about trust is something that really rings true to me, Amanda. When you hear Brian talk about it with all the drivers we talk to, that's a big one. They want to not only trust the company that they work for, but they want to know that the company that they work for trusts them. And I don't know if it's your experience, Brian, but in our experience here on this podcast, we've learned that truck drivers can smell BS from 10 miles away, and they don't let you get away with it. And I think that's part of that whole trust building thing where, you can't really pull one over on these guys, and especially not with all the options that they have. It's like you said, the turnover rate is so high in this industry. A lot of times drivers, why mess with something that I don't like when I could just go to XYZ company who's offering me all these things? And hey, it even says on their ad that they don't have inward facing cameras. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, but that trust is just absolutely vital going both ways from the driver to the fleet and vice reverse.
Yeah, like on the cameras, for example, if you're going to use them and punish every mistake, you're going to break trust. It's that simple. I mean, it's how you use the camera. So if you're going to use it for coaching, continuous improvement, helping you understand ways to do your job better, looking at your systems and processes, great. If you need the cameras to help you post crash, it's critical. I don't know how you operate without it, but if you use it as a weapon, right, to punish people, for making honest mistakes, you're going to destroy trust. Progressive discipline, where every little incident results in a strike or a suspension or a warning, that destroys trust too. I mean, you got to look at when something goes wrong, did we make an honest mistake or was it reckless behavior? And if most incidents, for example, have their roots in honest mistakes. I thought I was doing the right thing, turned out I wasn't. So you coach. Maybe you need to do remedial training. Maybe you just need to sit down side by side. But if you treat an honest mistake the same way as somebody deliberately speeding through a well-marked school zone, you're not differentiating. You're not looking at what went into it. And so it's so easy to break trust. And early on, I mean, our payroll systems were just terrible. So there were payroll inaccuracies, right? We never meant to have payroll errors, but we did. We would always correct them, but that's a day later or a week later, and people need their money now. So that things where you don't even intend to break trust, you do. And we finally put something in place saying that, look, if there's a payroll error, it's made right that day, period. And created accountability for payroll accuracy because garbage in, garbage out. Because what looks to be honest and we'll get it fixed, it's anything but. And so I think drivers and employees in general ought to hold us to a high standard. And there should be some forgiveness when we make a mistake as long as we correct it. But these are the ways I think you break trust: is promising to do one thing and not doing it.
Yeah. Payroll
mistakes. A blame-based, punishment-based system. These are all ways that we work so hard to build it, but it's so easy to destroy it.
Absolutely. Something happened a week or so ago on the podcast that I just want to get your thoughts on from a culture perspective, Brian, because Amanda and I don't really script anything that happens on this podcast. We like to get the drivers talking, and we're fortunate to have a great group of them that are willing to open up to us. And last week we had two guys on the show that had never been on the show before. One of them has been working for Liquid Trucking for about 8 years. The other one has driven trucks for over 25 years and pulled every single type of trailer that you can imagine, and he's just now making the venture into tanking. And as he said that, and the other guy was listening, the guy that's been with Liquid popped in and he said, hey, make sure Marcus sends you my number because I want you to be able to give me a call if you have a question on something like that. How important is that type of a culture where the drivers are helping drivers unprompted from management? How important is that for a fleet's success over time, Brian?
I mean, critical. If you can get to that level, I mean, when you have peer-to-peer training, peer-to-peer accountability, unscripted, just organic, that to me is top level because who's going to see an opportunity for improvement faster? Somebody sitting in their office or two employees working side by side with each other? So when you got employees that have a vested interest in the company such that they're willing to help each other, it helps the organization, it helps the employees. it's also a brother's keeper type thing too, because, I mean, I don't want you to put yourself into harm's way because you might not know how to do a certain function. So all the way around, the more you can encourage peer to peer, that's the best kind of training out there. When you can get a peer to gather around a group of his or her fellow drivers or mechanics or whatever and say, look, I've been doing this 20 years. This is the single best practice to, whatever it is, unload, load, to lock and brace, whatever your specialty is, that goes further than any other training course, any other outside trainer you could bring in. So I mean, peer to peer is really huge. And when you have a driver that says, "Hey, here's my number," that's you want to bottle that. You know what I mean? It's really good.
Exactly. Exactly. And when it happened live, you could see it in Amanda's and my faces. We're both just like, hey, gold just happened, But, Amanda and I both come from terrestrial radio roots. She's worked in it even longer than I have. And Amanda, I don't know if it's like this for you. I worked with so many people in my radio career before I got to this job where you want to talk about fractured culture. I knew guys that had been working for decades together in the same studio that would not talk to one another when the microphones went off. And I'm getting to a point here, but real quick, do you have any examples of that, Amanda, where you're just looking at a culture that is so broken, you wonder if there's ever any coming back from it?
I will say that there's definitely a divide in generations when it comes to office culture in radio. And I think tech is part of the divide, but I also think that change is scary to anybody. I will say by the time I started pushing 40, I got to that point where I'm like, ew, this update is different. I don't know how to do this. So there would be a lot of that. I will say one person I worked with that I had the most amount of respect for realized he was kind of aging out of things as the technology grew. And so rather than kind of sully the industry that he loved or try to change the way that he had been doing it, he didn't want to go with the new technology. I wouldn't say that that was a change in culture. I would say he held fast to the culture he knew and he decided to bow out and retire rather than kind of try to adapt to what was coming. So, I found that very interesting. I think sometimes it's hard to make that division between changes in tech and changes in culture because sometimes they're so far intertwined, especially in our background in radio.
Well, the reason I asked that is because, like I said, I've seen some real fractured cultures in my time. And Brian, I wonder from your perspective, is there a point that culture can get so broken at a trucking company that it just, there's no coming back for it? And if that's the case, and you're going to start to try to build it back from square one, where does it all start? And how can you fix something that is so broken? Because there's a lot of fleets out there that drivers don't communicate. The dispatch and drivers are at each other's throats all the time. They feel like safety's out to get them. What do you do if you walk into a fleet and you see that culture that fractured? Is there any putting it back together?
I guess in some cases, yes, but I would also, not that I've worked with a company like this, any closeness, but I would imagine at some point it's too late. But I would guess that most would be, most could be turned around, but it might involve some difficult decisions. I mean, it might mean, most everything you see, one way or the other, is a reflection of leadership. Mm-hmm. So if the culture's got some challenges, but leadership is sincere and willing to address it, it can be fixed. But sometimes leadership is the problem. Leadership is creating their own silos. They've put in that blame culture. They've put in that idea of just, shut up and get the job done. They might look down on somebody who's is going to stop work because they've got a legitimate safety concern. It's like, when I was your age, we never did that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. You heard all that. So sometimes, the leadership may have to move out. Because again, I really believe that, like in the safety context, people talk about behavior-based safety. The concept is that safety is a function of employee behavior. And I think it's a grossly oversimplified term. I think it doesn't reflect reality. The reality is that employees adjust their conduct to the environment that they're in. And who creates the environment? The leaders. So you could put good people in a toxic culture, and you're going to get toxic behavior. It's not the people that you put into the culture. It's the leadership and what they've created. So if you can fix leadership, you can fix most everything else. But, if you get, famous last words, we've always done it this way. If that's the mentality, we've always done it this way. And, what do you know? You're not from this company, that kind of stuff. It's really hard. Can the company survive? Sure it can survive. But it's going to probably be mediocre, because remember, the customers are buying and coming back to the product that you put out there, and the product you put out there is really your culture. So it doesn't mean the company is doomed. It doesn't mean it's going out of business. It could chug along for a good long time, but without the soul and without the passion of the employees, and life's too short for that.
Yeah, boy, well said. I wonder what your thoughts are, Brian, on how to get to best kind of work the culture towards the employees taking ownership of all of not just the mistakes that they might make, but especially all of the good decisions, all of the correct safety decisions. I think it's so poignant that you say leadership has such an effect here. If your leadership is okay with cutting corners, eventually your drivers are going to be just fine with cutting corners as well. Where does it finally click? Because I see it every day here when we talk with drivers, Amanda, on this podcast. The drivers absolutely own their good safety practices, and you hear them. We've had episodes before, Brian, where we bring on a guy that just got kicked into the deep end. He's like 6 months in, and we'll pair him with a guy that's been here for 20 plus years and just let the new guy pepper the old guy with questions. And what you see in those in those particular episodes is that not only does this guy that's been here for 20 plus years have a philosophy in the way that he goes about doing this job, but he owns absolutely every aspect of the safety side of things. Is there a magic trick to making that happen, Brian, or is that kind of a collection of doing the right thing from a leadership standpoint that will eventually pay those dividends in the end?
I think it's doing the right thing, and what I'll be real careful about here is it's not one size fits all. In other words, different companies may have different ways to get there. Ours was the driver committee, where our drivers elected a driver committee. They elected a group of their leaders, and that committee, we didn't make a move after the committee was elected without the input of at least the chairman of the committee. That's how we tore down our silos. Does that mean that everybody needs to form a committee? Of course not. But the idea is, when you think about leaders, your leaders in your organizations may be the ones with the titles and the offices and all that. I get that. But what I care about is the frontline leaders, the people who are leading because they've got, won the respect and trust of their peers. And the more you can capture the power of your frontline leaders, the more you can get things done. So I really believe that's the key, is kind of creating a holistic approach that gets the voices of your front lines and captures the power of their leadership and their subject matter expertise. Again, we go into the boardroom. We're not the smartest guys in the room, but we're making the decisions as if we are, without the frontline input. I think that's how you break it down.
I love the driver committee, Amanda. It's so cool because not only do you see drivers get to have direct input, but they also, especially if you do a good job in electing, the chairman of that committee, drivers are going to feel like they're represented by somebody that has their best interest in mind. And again, we're just getting back to that trust aspect that Brian talked about earlier, Amanda. Any thoughts to share with us there? I've been kind of, taking my ball and running with it here, so I don't want to leave anything that you've got. I know you've always got great insight, so I want to give you a chance to jump in here.
No, you're fine. No, I love the concept of keeping all level employees involved. You have the committee, you also have the panel of drivers to test your things out. You're always making it feel like everybody has a vested interest. It's not one person's, belonging. It belongs to everybody. And I think that speaks volumes about how you make the culture the way that you want it to be when you do keep everyone involved. I'm going to care more when you care what I think at any level of employment.
Yeah.
Amanda, exactly. I think one rule you got to follow, though, is, storm on the inside, unite on the outside. And what that means is you want to cast this broad net to get as much perspective as you can. But there does come a time when you've got to make a decision. And then it's fair for you to say, we've gone through the process. We can't incorporate every thought. This is what we've decided to do. And now we expect people to, unite and align around that. So when if you have a robust process, it doesn't mean that you're going to that every idea is going to get implemented. It can't work that way. But it means you're going to listen, you're going to be careful. But then when it comes time to make the plan, you're going to do it with the best information you've got. And that at that point, the debate has to end. Again, the example I would use is, installing the truck cameras. We went through the process, made the decision, and we had 4 guys who said no, and we said, we love you, but you can't drive here. I mean, if you're going to make a decision, then you got to stick with it. And fortunately, because we followed what we thought was a fair process, the vast majority of the team was on board with it.
Yeah, that's such a big part of it, is taking all of that perspective under advisement and just going through it. And you're right. I mean, it's business. Obviously, hard decisions have to be made every now and then. And that's a hard decision from the drivers in, too, because who knows? They could have loved that job, and maybe it's just that one thing, I've got a story from a different fleet here that I use anecdotally, Brian, where as an older driver, did not want to have the inward-facing cameras, railed against it, was so upset, thought about quitting, and one day he was cited for talking on his cell phone while he was driving. And the cops swore up and down, "I saw you on your cell phone." Well, the guy called up management and he said, "Go to the footage. I want to know what was going on." He was picking his nose, and the cop thought that he was on a phone, but completely exonerated him. And I'll tell you, it took one scenario to make that guy a complete believer in that tech. And, that's part of it, right? If you make that decision, you leave that good company before you realize why these things are actually happening and how it helps not only the company, but it definitely helps the driver as well. You might miss out on a great opportunity just because you were kind of set in your ways a little bit. And, change is tough. That's kind of something. It's been a theme on this during this interview is change is tough, but you're always wanting to make the best decisions to move the company forward and to make sure that you can be, safer, more profitable, all those things that trucking companies want to be. And I really want to say, I think Liquid's got a lot of that in spades, just in talking to the drivers here, listening to how happy they are, understanding that they own the safety culture at this company. And, hey, I mean, we get bunch of them that are willing to come on this podcast. And sometimes, Brian, truck drivers aren't always the most outgoing. Sometimes they're a little bit guarded, but we've been able to turn some of them into budding broadcasters here on this show. And it's been really fun because of how much we get to learn. And I'm sure with the amount of time you've spent in the industry, talking to drivers is one of the best ways that we can learn what's really going on here, isn't it, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about having some drivers become budding broadcasters is great because, you're right. I mean, a lot of companies wouldn't get people to join a podcast like that. And it shows them trust for them to come and say, all right, I'll do that and I'll talk and have fun with it. And it's all about building a stronger, better company, right? It sounds like Liquid Trucking is just on a very different plane from a lot of trucking companies out there, and it's clear why, because you're spotlighting the driver, the heartbeat of the company. It's important too when you think about our different employees is to access the families. I mean, it's no longer enough these days, I think, to just access our employees because, back in the old days, people couldn't get a hold of us, right, when we were at work. And today, how would you like to get a hold of me? Send me a text message, call me, social media, and so involving the family in the company's mission is critical to building the culture, especially in this day and age when we're so accessible.
Yeah, we talked to our guy Jake Debo, who handles recruiting at Liquid, and he'll tell you that sometimes he's talking to a prospective driver, sometimes he's talking to the spouse of of said driver, and that's all part of recruiting and I think retention too, Brian. It becomes easier to keep good drivers around if you can have a culture in place that is kind of family centric. And, something that the drivers have told us on this podcast before is if I got something going on at home, my spouse has a medical problem, I've got a kid that's about to be born, Liquid will bend over backwards to get that driver where they need to be. And I think that type of stuff plays so huge in retention, Brian, but that's a number that you can never really, well, you can't put a number on it. There's no way to actually quantify it, but it's so important in trucking, especially when you consider some of these guys are gone for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time. Having the family in mind from a company standpoint seems to be a pretty big, important thing for retention these days.
Yeah, it's a good example where you have to have some flexibility in your process. So, for example, we had a non-negotiable process about texting or talking on your phone, your handheld while driving, right? We weren't going to negotiate that process. But if we knew that somebody had an issue at home, somebody was sick or something, we would create extra latitudes, pull over, check in, and then get back on the road. So in other words, as long as you told us you were pulling over, as long, we would give you more time and make sure that you had time to take care of personal. So, because, if we would say, well, too bad, just keep driving. Well, and I know both that there's going to be a temptation to check in at home using the phone. And that's something that we simply couldn't tolerate. By the same token, to ignore the personal side is silly. So we just said, look, as long as we know, we'll work with you to accommodate the schedule for more check-ins or get you home more often, as you said. But whatever it is, there was a way to let you stay connected with home without violating one of our golden rules, which is the phone while you're driving.
Yeah, absolutely. That phone while you're driving thing always kind of turns my eye towards the safety side of things. And you just released a book very recently called Making Safety Happen, Brian. Let's talk a little bit about that. When was that released?
It came out June 2nd in ebook, hardcover, and audiobook.
Very cool. Did you narrate the audiobook yourself?
No, sir.
Maybe he'll do the next one after this.
Yep, got to do the next one. Well, Amanda and I have got a little bit of homework leaving out of this interview because, Brian, you said you're going to send us a copy of the book, and we are very grateful for that. Can't wait to get my hands on it. What are some of the main themes that you're covering in the book, Making Safety Happen?
The book follows. I'll take you through the pattern in a minute, but it's like we've been talking about culture on this conversation. It sort of argues that there is no such thing as the separate, mysterious safety culture. That safety is just a function of the health of your overall culture. I mean, can you imagine a company doing well in safety if the overall culture is broken? It won't happen. By the same token, if the culture is healthy and you're having some safety challenges, a healthy culture can look those challenges in the eye and overcome them. So the book takes a approach. First thing we got to do is change how we think. So if we want to change how we act, first we got to change what we believe. So we'll talk about safety not being a priority. It's a non-negotiable core value. Priorities shift, values don't. We'll talk about things like that to kind of get us to think differently. Then we're going to talk about the leader's role. And when we talk about the leader's role in driving safety, because safety has to be leader-driven, we go from our executives all the way to our frontline leaders, people that we've talked about already on this podcast. So leaders at all levels, the mid-manager's role, et cetera, et cetera. And then we go into employee engagement, right? So that we make sure that we create true, meaningful engagement, not the sugary, sweet campfire stuff. And then we go into unconditional respect for process, right? In other words, process has to be clear, and there can't be exceptions to the process. It's talked before about texting and driving. I mean, if the process permits it, prohibits it, which I hope it does, we can't say, well, we'll look the other way for you. We have to have clear process that we're all accountable for. And then we talk about accountability in the book, and accountability is, overused, right? In other words, we tend to talk too much about, the employee whose hands were on the wheels and hold them accountable, and kind of in a punishment, blame context. I focus on that, but I focus more on organizational accountability. I believe a company can cause a crash as much as a individual can. A company can cause a crash, poor training, putting people into the job that aren't yet ready for it, undue production pressure. I mean, production pressure is generally a good thing. If we have production pressure, heck, that means we're busy. But out of control, right, encouraging people to cut corners, it's not good. So, we look at individual and organizational factors. Go back to the cell phone for a minute, right? You got to stay off your phone, but what if the office is calling the driver every 5 minutes? Well, that doesn't work. So we've got to make sure that, we're all in it. Everybody's got a role to play. The book hits that hard, and then we end the book with saying, all right, we all might have a bad day. That's just part of being in business. So we talk about how to lean in to adversity, to learn from it, to build a stronger, smarter, more resilient company. So it covers a big gamut of topics, and I really tried to put down what I've learned over the years, but not in a way that says, you must do this, here's the single right way to do that, because it's not that simple. It's like, here are some things that have worked for me and others that I've worked with. Take it, make it your own, and adapt it to your situation, and no two are the same.
I love that. Amanda, I bet you can't wait to get your hands on this book. It's too bad you got kind of an empty nest going on now. Otherwise, you might be thinking about putting this book into practice to keep the household in order with all those kids running around, right? 10 years ago, where was this book?
I will say, though, that even in your book, even with the way that you're approaching this with, hey, I'm not giving you a step-by-step guide of here's what you need to do, but, you can adapt it to your life. That's so similar to the way that you keep everybody in the company involved at different levels. I mean, I love that. I love the mentality. And I'm hoping I don't have any bad days, but I'm going to be tempted to skip to the end. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I like the resilience chapters because those are the ones that we prefer not to look at, right? But it's critical.
And is this your only book, or am I mistaken in thinking that you've got another one that's out there and has been for a little while?
This is my first book in 10 years. I've got one called Leading People Safely that I co-wrote in 2016 with Jim Schultz, who was Senior Vice President of Safety at Waste Management. So I kind of brought more of my privately held entrepreneurial-sized company expertise. Jim came from a government background, from CSX and then Waste Management. So he came from a large enterprise background, and we kind of distilled the common themes regardless of the size of your company, the complexity, public, private, the sector, and really came out well. And then before that, Driving to Perfection, which was about company culture, not so much safety focus. So, I mean, this book, I've learned a lot in 10 years, and it's just kind of bringing everything forward.
Well, you got to go pick it up right now. Making Safety Happen, once again, available in ebook, audiobook, and did you say hardcover or softcover?
Hardcover.
Hardcover. Go out and pick it up right now. Lots of great stuff in that, especially if you're seeing the scaffolding of your culture burn down around you. This is really can help you change thinking. It can help you start to repair that a little bit. Great stuff here, Brian. I want to say thank you first and foremost. I want to make sure, Amanda, that we haven't left anything on the table here before we let Brian get back to it. Obviously, we appreciate all the time here today and all of this insight, and you're definitely getting an invite back here. But Amanda, did you have anything else for Brian before we start to wrap this thing up?
No, honestly, what I was going to say is what you just said is after we read the book, we need a follow-up if you're so inclined.
Oh, of course. I'd be my pleasure to return. Let's return and bring on Polar Bear or another one of your drivers too.
Would love that. Get some real in the weeds driver perspective. That's what this podcast is all about. I think we could have a fantastic conversation with him. Brian Fielkow former owner and CEO of Jetco Delivery, former executive vice president and board member of GTI, author, keynote speaker, and I think we played it out here live for you today. One of the foremost industry experts on culture, and I think we could throw safety in there too, Brian. Seems like you've got your bases covered here. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We offer everybody that comes on this podcast, Brian, the final thoughts segment. This is your time to share anything that we might have left on the table, give any shout outs that you might want to. Thank you so much for your time today, Brian. Final thoughts from you before we wrap up here today.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I guess the final thought is there's a lot of people out there kind of telling you this is exactly how you have to do things, right? I mean, the world is full of influencers who I've learned to tune out, you know, and we're all on different journeys. We're all, our organizations and us personally are at different points in our evolution. So what I hope Making Safety Happen will do, and what I hope this podcast will do, is meet every listener where they're at, and catch people with that one idea, just that one idea that they can take to raise the bar on your own performance, your own organization performance, and that's the key. But at the core, it's leader driven. Every one of us is and can be a leader. It's employee owned. It's anchored in process, and it's fueled to life by continuous improvement, continual learning, and it's a journey with no finish line. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Brian. Fantastic stuff. We'll get you back on here again. That's Brian Fielkow. We'll be right back here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Great stuff there from Brian Fielkow. Didn't even feel like we really got past scratching the surface of the knowledge and experience of Brian, but great stuff, Amanda, and I think we'll be fortunate enough to get him back on the air again. If he keeps writing books, we're going to keep trying to pump those out to you guys because, I mean, just a wealth of knowledge there. And I actually think, Amanda, what I want to do is I want to get the book he's going to send us because he told us off the air he would mail us both a copy of the book. I want to get it, read through it real quick, and then I want to give that book away to the Liquid Trucking drivers via some sort of contest here. So stay tuned because the book that Brian wrote, Making Safety Happen, that just came out in June, we'll have one of those in hardcover for you guys to compete for in some way, shape, or form. Maybe that'll be part of our next season of trivia in the award lineup there. But what a cool interview.
Absolutely. I love how he came up with the tactic. He came up with the method. And I really feel like, you know, seeing him apply it to multiple things just shows you how well it works. And it's so much more than teamwork, this tactic of having everybody involved, having everybody feel like their opinion matters. It is greater than teamwork. It is greater than that because it is massively influential on the culture of a company. And the last thing you want to have within a company is a versus, whether it's employee versus management, whether it is driver versus dispatch, whatever that versus is, you don't want to have that versus. You want everybody to feel like they've got an opinion that is valued. And seriously, I just found it so interesting to see how he applied that to multiple things over and over again. I was going to say genius, but I mean, it kind of is genius.
It kind of is because, and listen, if anybody listening out there has ever been a manager in any capacity before, you'll understand this greatly. If you've had a little bit of a culture problem wherever you're managing, be it retail, gas station, fast food, it doesn't matter. That can spread like cancer throughout your organization. And one of the things that Brian touched on there is he would call them tough decisions. You might have to make some tough decisions. And I think a lot of times for management, what a tough decision is letting somebody go. And you and I both talked about it. I've been on both sides of the tough decision and having to let somebody go. And it's never easy because, you know, I was a manager of one of Oregon's first legal dispensaries for a couple of years. And I'll tell you right now, working with kids that want to work at dispensaries is a bit chew your bottom lip off frustrating. because they're not the most punctual. They listen, but they don't comprehend. And this is all, it kind of goes with the territory, right? This kind of a pothead type thing. But when I had a cancerous duo in my team, I had to keep one of them and I had to let one of them go. The one that I had to keep was the one that did all the good things for the culture. She was always helping people and everything like that. Her problem was she called out all the time, and she was always sick with something. And look, she had some health problems. There's nothing you can do about that. The one that I had to let go was the one who would fill everybody's shift. She always wanted the work. It didn't matter how much there was. If somebody couldn't make it, she was going to fill in. And I had to keep the other person that was constantly calling out because the toxicity from the person who would fill in was so real. And it would affect I could leave and come back 4 hours later. I could leave a happy, healthy dispensary, come back 4 hours later and feel like if somebody didn't give it CPR right now, we were going to have a mutiny on our hands and everybody was going to quit. And that, I think, goes to show you how important culture can really be and how important even one person's take on this culture can be. You know, we listened to a guy, and we talked about him plenty on this episode, but you listen to a guy like Polar Bear, and one thing that always comes out of his mouth when he's talking about the way that he does the job is, hey, I love this company. I'll never work for another company. And the thing is yes, Liquid installed that culture that he gets to work within, but after almost 30 years here, what you find is a guy like Polar Bear becomes a big part of the culture. The younger Polar Bears out there see the old Polar Bear and they go, I want to be like that. I don't want to be like the guy who's always angry, who never wants to help, who's, Johnny Super Trucker, who's out there doing it on his own, never any questions, always knows best. But it can be really hard if you step in to a culture that isn't like that to turn it around. And Brian, he talked about that a little bit. I think there is a point, even though he was hesitant to say, I think there's a point where it's gone too far. I've seen it go too far. And I still know that some of these companies I worked for have never turned the culture around. And it doesn't have anything to do with me. It's just, you look back, you talk to people and you go, hey, how's it changed? And a lot of the times what you hear in those places, I had one buddy tell me that I worked with for a couple of years, you left 6 months before the sky fell. And this has been, 3 years after I worked there. And he goes, oh, and by the way, the sky's still falling. Every day the sky's falling and we can't do anything about it. So we just learned to live with it, which I see you shaking your head right now. It's the last thing you want to do is live with a bad culture, right? Because your good employees will leave bad culture. They'll leave bad management. They'll leave all of it.
I think it's hard. I think it's hard when you talk about, especially when you talk about our previous industry, because there are only a handful of jobs, right? So I feel like we tend to be willing to put up with a lot more because of the scarcity of work. And it's a shame because it puts people in a position to make other people uncomfortable, to put other people, under their thumb. And it does not matter if you are the janitor or if you are the operations manager in the building. Everybody has a role to play. And if you are making somebody so uncomfortable that they don't want to even do their job, there's a problem there. And so the culture is everything from the top to the bottom and everything in between, and making sure that everybody, again, it's that opinion thing. It's making sure that my opinion feels valued. You don't have to do what I think is the best decision, but I want to know you're at least listening and considering it, right? And that's so much of what this conversation of culture ended up being about. It's just making sure that everybody feels like, hey, a fully functional person, a whole person that can be taken seriously, because isn't that what we all want? There's nothing more frustrating than screaming your opinion on something and being completely dismissed. So absolutely wonderful to see the culture in Liquid, even just amongst the drivers themselves. And, we keep talking about it over and over again, but nobody is telling Polar Bear to go out there and mentor somebody, right?
Right.
I've seen companies that have mentorship programs. Liquid, a lot of these drivers, it just kind of is happening naturally for them, and that speaks volumes.
Yeah, it's a real pay it forward type system, right? You helped me, now I need to go help the next guy because this is a constantly spinning wheel, and we have to keep it spinning in balance. And another part there that you touched on pretty heavily, I think, is just respect. It's so easy and so low effort to treat everyone with respect, and I came to that conclusion, Amanda, I heard it one day. It was probably a stupid Facebook quote that I scrolled by years ago, but it was as simple as saying, everybody you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't need to make a dent in anybody's day. I don't need to be the guy that upsets somebody that's already upset. Everybody gets my respect, even though they say respect is earned. Well, you earn it by looking me in the eyes and shaking my hand and showing me that you respect me enough to learn my name. That's where it starts, and it builds from then on out. And in working with Liquid, one thing I notice is all of the people from all the way up to all the Schmidt brothers, down through the top level of management, down through the entire terminal staff at Plattsmouth and out at Bartow, have always treated me, even though I'm kind of the weird dude that just showed up one day and started asking everybody to be on podcast episodes. They always call me by my name when we're in here having these conversations. They always have respect for my time. They always give their time graciously. It really is like a disease that's a positive one that everybody at the company has, and it's just part of the way they do things. And I think there's a lot more people that don't work for Liquid Trucking listening to this podcast right now, and I think there's a lot that you can take. It doesn't matter if you pump gas or you stack boxes or you buck hay bales. Whatever you do for a living, if you work with and around other people, that portion of it, that little bit of respect, can go a long way to build your culture. And hey, once you've got a culture as good as what we've got here at Liquid Trucking, it's pretty easy to maintain it. It's just kind of like respect people. I'll if I can be so crass, don't be a dick. It really is like it's pretty simple, right? I could tell just by looking at you that, like, yeah, I might as well say it here. Might have to bleep it. That's okay. But you don't have people like that. And look, I know they're out there. We've all met them. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in. And when you talk about the culture of a company like Liquid, a few bad apples can really ruin the bunch, Amanda. And that's where those hard decisions come in that Brian was talking about. And look, nobody wants to make them, but sometimes you got to make them for the benefit of the crew. You know what I'm saying?
I definitely know what you're saying, but it's nice to see people leading others in the positive culture, and that will continue to make the entire company successful.
Go and check out Brian's book. Again, it's available in audiobook, ebook, and hardcover. It's called Making Safety Happen. It's out now on all the places. All you got to do is type that into your Google search bar. You'll find a place where you can connect with that book. Or you can wait with bated breath for us to give my copy away. And you know what? I'll even devalue it a little bit by signing the damn thing. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to sign somebody else's book, especially not after he was cool enough to come on our podcast and give us 40 minutes of great content there. But we will give that book away. I think it's something that the drivers could learn from, management could learn from, everybody could learn from, and we will make an effort to get Brian back on the show here in 4 or 6 months or so, because I think we all got taught a really big lesson by somebody who's had massive success in implementing said lesson today, Amanda.
I'm going to do everything but apply it to my household. How is that?
Well, a household's a little more like a dictatorship, Amanda. Yes. I think that we've all learned that. Those of us that are married, we understand that, there's certain things that you don't get to do anymore. Unless you can do them before your wife gets home, which is like going golfing, which is what I'm going to do as soon as we shut these microphones off. So
get out of here.
I mean, it's 85 outside. It's just baking out there. And I know that means the course is going to be wide open. So that's where my butt's headed right after we wrap up here today. This has been an awesome episode. Don't forget to head over to podcast.liquidtrucking.com to hear all the rest of the awesome episodes we've done. There's a lot of them, and we're going to pump out another one for you next Wednesday, 5 a.m. local time. For Amanda, I've been Marcus. Please, drivers, stay safe out there. Keep the shiny side up. We'll see you next week for more Liquid Trucking Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.
Interested in finding out more about what it takes to bring a podcast like the Liquid Trucking Podcast to your fleet? Bulldog provides tailor-made top-to-bottom podcast production services. We'll meet your terminal staff, connect with your drivers, and bring you the content you want your drivers to hear. Type bulldog.works into your browser to connect with us and learn more about what we can do for your fleet. That's bulldog.works for podcasts, tenacious recruiting, and more.